Hi everyone, and welcome back to Niallpointsreality Reality with Niall and
Hello.
Thomas. We are back reviewing another episode of Demo from Belgique. I don't know why I said it French, but
I do. Ooh, you've done something now. You've insulted the Flemish people. No, I'm kidding. Do you know how to say it in Dutch, though?
Yeah, Belgique. Belgique?
No, België.
Belgique. Oh, God, I hate Dutch, man. Why is it so?
Then why are you learning?
So complicated. Anyway, we're back with another episode. We're reviewing Aflevering 5 of Demo. Another fantastic episode. I feel they managed to cram a lot into this episode. So much happened. This could turn into a long podcast. I really hope not. Thomas only has 16% battery on his headphones left. This is going to be fun.
I mean, to be fair, I don't necessarily need them. It's just so we don't get too much of an echo, I suppose.
Yeah. Before we get into it, do remember to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and ring the notification bell. If you can also go to niallpoint.com, we will be asking you there. If you visit there, you'll get a pop-up, and we'll be asking you to help us raise money for a friend of ours who is trans and raising money for gender affirming surgery. So it'd be awesome if you could help out. But let's get into this. Right. I need to explain how long it took me to realize that motorcycle delivery man was not going through the streets of Bangkok.
Yeah.
It was an embarrassing amount of time.
Yeah. I mean, I maybe it's easier for me to tell because I live here. I could easily tell from the scenery that was not Thailand.
Yeah, none of those roads looked like they were in Thailand, and I don't know how.
No.
I feel like I must have missed a bit.
I feel like. Do you know when I saw that scene? The first thing that popped in my head is, oh, this is going to be recorded before they went on the trip.
Yeah,
like sort of like a prequel thing.
Sort of thing.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as well.
Anyway, what it turns out to be, we get different scenes. We're switching between Thailand and this motorcycle in Belgium. Turns out they get to speak to their loved ones, but through a doll of them, which
that was so funny.
Those freaked me out a little bit.
Yeah,
they're too realistic. But basically, they're taken to an airport hangar. They speak to their family and friends, and it cuts out. And then Gilles asks for 4 people to do a quiz and 2 people to jump.
That was such a good, that was a good joke from Gilles.
Yeah, so they all thought that the jumpers were going to be jumping out of the plane. Turned out, no, jumpers were just getting a trampoline. And the quizzers were having to answer questions falling through the sky. Wild. They had to get questions about their loved ones correct so that they could give them color, get correct color so that they could cut a wire off a paint bomb that was on the table around them in Belgium.
Yeah.
It was sort of like this weird real-time international spy situation, but fun.
Mission Impossible.
Yeah,
and they did the stunts themselves.
They did. Hilda was loving life.
She was,
So I messaged you yesterday when I was watching this because I know you're afraid of heights.
Yeah.
And I was like, would you do this? And you're like, you'd be pissed off at yourself not for doing it, right?
Yeah. Here's the thing. I'm not going to actively be like, I'm going to book this now and do that. But if the opportunity, say, for example, you're doing this TV show and you get that opportunity, I feel like, because in the past they've done similar sort of stunts before. And if they really don't want to do it, they can just choose not to. I would be shitting myself in that plane, and I would probably contemplate all the way up to the second that you jump out of it. But I would be so pissed at myself, like you said, if I didn't do it. If I went down again and I didn't jump, I would be kind of devastated because, like, how many times do you get that opportunity? How many people can say, "Well, I've done a bungee jump or skydiving"?
Yeah, I don't understand how you keep mixing those two up. But
Because you both jump from a height, and
So yeah, this was where I lost a little bit with the who was answering what questions. 4 people answered questions. They had to choose 3 people who they were more convinced were right. But everyone except Hilda doubted themselves, really.
Yeah. And maybe we should just, I don't know if you mentioned it, I might have missed it. We should also just mention what the other 2 are doing. They weren't jumping on a trampoline for nothing. So basically, the other 2, one of them had to jump on a trampoline. There was like a sort of like a wall in between them. One of them had to jump on the trampoline and shoot what I thought was like an arrow shoot, like one of those pistols with arrows.
Yeah.
And the other one was behind the wall trying to hold up, what you call it in English? What would you call that thing they were holding up?
A bullseye. Target.
A bullseye. So the other one was holding up a target, a bullseye, and then the one jumping on the trampoline had to shoot it. Now, the faster they shot it... I need to
pause you a second here. I think everybody wants to know, why are you holding a spoon?
Oh, because I'm having tea, and before I started explaining, I was just about to stir my tea. So, sorry. I'm going to put down the weapon. Okay. So basically, the faster they shot the bullseye, the better for the contestants jumping from
because they got to
plane.
Stop answering questions.
Yeah. So as soon as they hit the bullseye, the questions stop. But the questions get increasingly harder. So the more that they struggled hitting the bullseye, the more questions that the other would get, and the more chance that they would have of getting one wrong. So that was kind of an important thing. Now, I want to say right off the bat, Michelle fucked that up completely. I don't know what her problem was with holding that target steady. I was like, it's not the easiest thing, but it's not that hard to keep it up for like 10 seconds. And just stand still, and she just was not,
Yeah, it's sort of weird though, because she managed to shoot the target as well.
Because was it Alexi? Pedro? No, because Alexi was holding the target
she could have easily, if she is the mole, she could have easily also not been trying to shoot it. But I still think she's suspicious. It could be a double bluff.
She is suspicious. Yeah.
The face watching them do the fall was hilarious as well, actually. But
oh my god,
yeah, Hilda was certain she was correct on all of the questions she answered. I think she answered all 8 as well, thanks to Michelle.
I think so. I don't remember who had to answer how many questions.
But she got her color, and then they chose Nimrod as well.
So it was between Nimrod, Sarah, and Pedro. They were the ones left.
Pedro was like, nah, I've made a mistake. He was like,
yeah, don't take my color because it's not going to be the right color. And Nimrod was sort of like, oh, I think I've got all of them right. And then at the point where he's supposed to give his color to, their loved ones in Belgium, then he's sort of like, well, I could be wrong. I could have one wrong. It's like, that was again suspicious to me. I was like,
True. It was very strange. But then Nimrod's color was indeed wrong. He got the weight of his brother wrong.
Yeah.
And exploded his brother and the rest of the loved ones in paint. Beautiful blue paint powder. Why did I get a fright when this paint bomb went off? Like, I knew it was coming.
Yeah.
I still jumped out my skin.
I mean, maybe you just got a bad conscience.
A bad conscience?
That's what they say, isn't it? If you scare easily, it's because you got a bad conscience. You've got something, you've done something wrong, and you're.
I've heard of nervous disposition before. I've never heard of having a bad conscience.
Yeah, that's what we say that in. You're learning a bit of Dutch. I said it in English, but that's the saying that we have in Dutch. You've got if you scare easily, you've got a bad conscience. It means you've done something bad, and you're scared you're about to get caught.
Yes, we then see them talk a little bit more to the loved ones. I do want to point out one thing that really made me suspicious of Michelle. Once again, during these calls. Did you see how subtly her face changed when her husband thought that she could be the mole?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, there's this moment where just sort of her face sort of twinges a little bit. I'm like, that's it. She's the mole.
You're just in a tunnel vision with Michelle.
I am. I'm not even ashamed to admit it. I'm in tunnel vision with her through and through. They then have to stop for gas.
Yeah.
I've got to tell you, I spent most of the time trying to figure out what the hell the song was.
Yeah.
So try and explain this.
So basically, there you had, I think it was Pedro and Michelle were in a gas station. So basically, the two cars stop at a gas station. The driver asked Pedro and Michelle, could you go in and pay for the gas? They go in. As soon as they go in, someone locks the doors and they're stuck in there. And as they go in, they can hear a song playing by Clouseau, which is a very famous Flemish band. They've been making music since the 90s. They even did Eurovision for us at one point, 91, I think. And one of their biggest hits that everybody here in Flanders knows that song. One of their biggest hits is playing in Thailand in a gas station. So obviously they're already a little bit suspicious, like, oh, why is Clouseau playing here? So the challenge they had to do was they had to try and make the people that were left in the car, who were also at that point locked in the car, who could not get out, they had to try and make sure that the people in the car would honk at the same time that two specific words were being sung during the song, were being the words that are the song that was being played, which I thought in itself is a very difficult challenge, even with a song that everybody knows. Like, how do you communicate what needs to happen? Because obviously the people, Pedro and Michelle in the gas station, they can hear the song. They were seeing all of these hints that had something to do with the title of the song or something to do with the band, but they don't know what to do with those hints because they can't communicate with the people in the cars. And the people in the cars just got a message on the screen that said honk on and then a word from the song.
Yeah.
But they're obviously like,
was this, I need to ask about the translation here. Was it literally honk on making love?
Wait, so what was it? Yeah. So one of the words that they had to honk on was vrijen, which literally means making love in Dutch. So they had to honk on that word, and then the other car had to honk on the word noon.
Because there's a pretty fantastic moment where Hilda just assumes that she has to somehow
make love to the steering wheel.
She's doing all sorts. She's trying to kiss Nimrod. He's like, "Oh, get away!"
At some point, she was literally twerking on the steering wheel because she thought she had to make love with the steering wheel. But this is how hard that challenge was. Is that they just knew that they had to honk on a word, but they were like, well, what does this word mean? Because they had no idea that this word had anything to do with a song, let alone the song that was playing in. So the way that they were trying to signal each other, and Hilda was just, at that point, I thought, like, Hilda is the mole, because she's just doing everything to make this as chaotic as possible.
But that's Hilda through and through, really.
Yeah. But you remember when I said sometimes there's this one contestant that is often very suspicious.
Oh, we said that about
and they
Mikael,
do.
And
yeah. They sabotage everything, and it's like, you are so obviously sabotaging. This is so weird. You're so suspicious, and then it turns out they're just that much of an idiot. They're just that idiotic. They're that thick, and they are that chaotic that they just make everything go wrong unintentionally. And Hilda is that person. And I said that before, like, I feel like she is this year's Mikael, where she just accidentally makes everything go wrong.
Yeah. Important note on this challenge is they get €4,000, and the longer it takes them to escape, the more money they lose. And the hints Thomas mentioned cost money as well. So,
yeah.
I do think they eventually got there.
They did.
It was tough going. I mean, I have no idea the song, so I would have had to no clue what was going on anyway. So I'd have been out. But I think they did as well as they could. I don't see any way that someone could have done this much better.
But the thing is,
being a bit less clumsy. But
I just thought
the clumsiness.
The thing is, you don't know this because you're not Flemish, so you don't know that song. Like I said, everybody knows this song. Even kids know this song. It's such a massive, massive hit, and they're such a massive band that once they figured out, Clouseau's song Anna, that's the title of the song, Anna is playing in the shop, and then you have that message that says honk on the word making love, or in Dutch vrijen. That is one of the most famous lines of the song. So at that point, I was like, how are you not getting this? How are you not getting that you have to honk when the word... They were there with the text. They were there with the lyrics.
But here's the thing with the text. It did look as though they were like showing the words just slightly out of time. A little bit. Michelle...
Yeah, but that's not what I mean. That's not what I mean. I mean that even when they were showing the lyrics, they still didn't figure out what they were supposed to do. Okay. I can understand not being on time because you know, if they're late with the cue cards, then obviously they're going to be late with honking. But they still didn't figure it out, and I was like, but now it's really obvious. So I don't know if that was stress or if that was just, or maybe Hilda was in the car with Nimrod. I still think Nimrod is pretty suspicious. So
we're going to fast forward a little bit because we find this out later on.
At the end, yeah.
At the end, but the mole coffer was in play here. The mole had a secret earpiece so they could hear what was going on everywhere.
Yeah.
And they even said what they would do if they were in the shop and what they would do if they were in the car.
Yeah.
So it didn't really give us hints as to who it could be still. But they were showing us things like, Pedro dropping the cards and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think that's a little bit too obvious editing. I think...
but Michelle dropped them as well at some point. Both of them did.
Oh, but here's what Michelle did more, is she was pointing to the words slightly after they started being said, so the timing was all off.
Yeah, but then Pedro was also changing cue cards really late as well, when I thought like, you just have to hand your cue card to Michelle and go to the next one. You could have done that on time. So I think both of them were really going at it. And at some point I was thinking, because these are the two most suspicious people, according to the Flemish public as well. I was thinking, if one of them is the mole, was the other just playing along with the mole, trying to get them to just... Because sometimes you would do, if you have a suspicion of, this is the person that I think is the mole, I'm doing this challenge with this person, so I'm going to test this person and see how far they go with their sabotage. That's what I was thinking at some point, was because if for example Pedro is doing these cue cards really late, is Michelle then in her, on her time being like, I'm gonna go a step further and see what Pedro does and see if he keeps going further and further,
Oh, we're peeling back another layer on the onion that is the mole.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Alexei and Sarah, because we're not really talking about them. Does that make them suspicious? Are they again flying onto the radar?
Yeah, they are. Sarah most of all, and that's why we need to talk about suspicious and who we suspect at the end of this episode. But yeah. But I also felt like they were quicker to figure out what they needed to do. In the car, they had the word noon, and for those people who don't know, the word noon was written Noen. That's not really how we say noon. That is more of a dialect. So the word in the song that's being sung is a bit of a dialect of Dutch. So I would have understood them being confused longer, because it's not, because at some point they were like, noon, what does that even mean? Noon, until they knew, it's
the song,
a line from the song. So I thought that they were pretty quick to figure it out, whilst having the more difficult clue. So in that sense, I don't really see what they could have done better in that challenge. I don't know. What do you think?
I honestly have no clue. I was like, I couldn't figure anything out. I was so confused at the whole thing because there's so much going on. And then we go straight to an elimination quiz.
I do want to ask before we get to that, if you were the mole, where would you rather have been in that challenge? Would you rather have been in the shop or in one of the cars, knowing that you have that earpiece?
In the shop, because you can then sabotage the whole game, because the whole thing was that only had to be one of the cars had to honk at the right time. It didn't need to be both.
No, both of them needed to.
That was what I saw in the subscriptions.
Okay.
In the subtitles, it didn't look like that. It just needed to be one of the subtitles.
That might just be wrong translation, but they definitely both needed to honk at the right time, because the two words that they had to honk at were in the same sentence, and they had to do it at the right time.
I'm not sure. What about you?
I feel like if you have an in-ear, when you're in the shop, you can hear them talking, but unless they're singing along with the song, unless they're trying to sing along with the song, you don't really have an idea when they're going to honk. But when you're in the car and you have your in-ear, you can hear the song playing, so you know when not to honk. Do you get me? So I felt like that would maybe be the better. That doesn't mean, of course, that the mole was in the car. You know, sometimes the mole doesn't get to do the part of the challenge that he or she wants to do. It all depends on how it goes. And like I said, my two main suspects my main suspect has always been Pedro, as I've said in previous episodes. So that doesn't really fit in with my narrative that Pedro is a mole. But then what you can do as the mole in the shop is buy all of those hints, those tips that cost a lot of money. So the amount that they can win goes down.
Did they end up buying all of them? Or did they just do the cheapest and the most expensive? Yeah.
I think they did two of them. Yeah.
Anyway, we're then told they get a little bit of time to try out some local delicacies. Was it squid crisps?
Yeah, all kinds of crisps and really disgusting ones. Yeah.
Yeah.
Weird.
It was very odd. But like Gio comes along and says it's time for an elimination round. At this point, I'm like, there's 20 minutes left of this episode. Twisty, what's happening?
Yeah.
There's 3 questions in the quiz for a challenge that hasn't happened yet. But they still have to answer.
And you messaged me like, well, this isn't fair. And I'm like, just keep watching.
Yeah. So they had this challenge about carrying durians across a forest.
Jungle-ish, yeah.
And having to do different things with Taiwanese. Not Taiwanese, sorry. Thai. What do you call Thailand? Thai. Just Thai. Thai, adverbs and famous fruit people is what I'm going to call them.
Famous fruit people, yeah. If someone is watching that hasn't watched them all, they're like, famous fruit people, what the fuck?
I mean, no one's watching this. But it was just odd. But then you suddenly see them fighting each other because they want to make sure that their answers are correct. They are, butterfly effect in it, aren't they? Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's what they've.
Yeah. Basically, what they had to do was, because they answered those questions without knowing what was going to happen, they had to try and manipulate the challenge that it went
what happened
their way, so that so that it fit their answers. And I thought, that's when I said to you, like, this challenge is ingenious, because this is such a big plus for the mole, because you're basically making sure that everybody sabotages, because the longer it takes for them to agree on which two people are, because those were the questions, which two people did this challenge, which two people did that challenge, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, since they've all randomly answered, they want their people that they've answered to do a certain challenge. And then the other one's like, well, I don't agree with that. I don't think this person should do that challenge. And the longer they discuss it, the more time goes by and the less time they have to get to the end point on time to actually earn the money. So the mole must have been like, fantastic.
Yeah.
Such a good challenge.
There's a real moment where you don't know if it is a case of moling it or a case of just trying to get through. And that is with Michelle and Hilda, who we've both had in our radar to different degrees, but we've had them in our radar where they basically know the answers. They know what they're going to do. And they agree just to fail the challenge.
Yeah. And lie about it.
Oh, and that's beautiful. That is beautiful. Oh. So they have to eat the fruit that corresponds with the
name of
the celebrity. So you have Olivia Rodrigo.
Olive. You have Georgia Meloni, which was a melon.
And I don't know the rest of them.
Yeah, I think there were a couple of Flemish ones among there as well. So
yeah, but they ate all the wrong fruit. But what they didn't know was that the other guys were told exactly what the answers were and what the task was. And they come back saying, oh, we got none right. And they're like, what? How?
Yeah.
The flustered face of Hilda was a sight to behold. She's just like, yeah, but also, this is the second time that Hilda brought up Ariana Grande. She's just shouting Ariana Grande at anyone who looks vaguely young. I'm like, I know she's 57, but still, come on, you can't just shout Ariana Grande at everyone. But yeah,
I mean, to be fair, my mom wouldn't know who Ariana Grande is, so that's already quite impressive.
But I think her sort of reaction was, how the hell do you know? Like,
and then just sort of trying to save herself, be like, well, if it's Hollywood actresses, I don't know who they are. It's like, surely you know who this person is, and surely you know who that person is. Because they're really like,
you know this Flemish person.
Yeah,
sort of. So definitely raises suspicions from the group on them. But was it just that they were trying to save their skin, or were they trying to sabotage? Or is it one of each?
I'm thinking, because I was thinking just now, why did they decide to fail the challenge? Because
Hilda
it had to. Yeah, I think it was because it had to fit their story. Because they said to each other, it would really suit me very well for my answers if we fail this challenge. And that's what they did. And Michelle, luckily for Hilda, agreed. And now I thought at that point, does Michelle agree because she has similar answers on her test and she also would benefit from this? Or is it because she's the mole and she's like, oh yeah, sure, let's fail it? Because that's 2 durians left, or a few durians less, so less money. So that was definitely suspicious from Hilda.
Yes, and Michelle, of course. We don't know yet quite what's going on, but they only managed to get 900 in the end. Now, I sort of faded out a little bit. What was Alexi's personal advantage? I missed this. There was too much reading involved.
I'm trying to think. Oh, so there were 6 contestants left, and there were 6 little chests on top of the temple where they had to go to, where they had to deliver the fruit. And the first person to get to the temple would have the chance to look in one of the chests, because they were all named, and see which answers they had given to those questions. Right. That was the advantage, which is, of course, interesting because these are questions about the mole. So in that sense, you could sort of like figure out, oh, I want to know who this person thinks is the mole. Because if Alexi, for example, thinks Pedro, I think Pedro knows who the mole is, and he can open that box and he can sort of like take advantage of those answers. So that was a personal advantage. Now, I loved the way that Nimrod was like, see ya. And he was like running. And if it wasn't for the fact that he got caught on a branch, he would have probably won that. Poor Nimrod. I felt sorry for him.
Nimrod is always quite clumsy when he starts to get really competitive.
Yeah, I love that. I love Nimrod.
He's hilarious. He's great. Yeah, so only 900
and
euros.
then we get to the challenge. And then we get to the elimination, the actual elimination results.
Yeah. And it's one less suspicious person. We know that their action in the rainforest was not because they were a mole. It was Hilda. Goodbye, sweet Hilda. This made me think even more, though, that it was Michelle. I'm tunnel visioned. I don't even care.
Because I know I think you had Michelle at number 1 and Hilda at number 2. So that just sort of empowers you to think that it's Michelle. I've had Hilda going up and down from 2nd to 3rd to 4th, back to 2nd, back to 3rd. She was very eclectic to me, but somehow in the back of my mind, like I said earlier, I always felt like she was just the clumsy one. And all the things that went wrong because of her were just, were just because she's Hilda, not because she's the mole, but just because she's
just Hilda.
Yeah, she's just clumsy that way.
Instead of saying Ik ben de mole, she's just going to say Ik ben Hilda.
Ik ben Hilda. And I love Hilda. I think she is one of the most enjoyable people that we've had on that show over the years. Just cheeky, funny, genuine, mental, but also just really kind and lovely and helpful. And yeah, I loved her. I'm sad to see her go. And I think a lot of people, I know some of my colleagues had her as their main suspect. So they were devastated. They were like, I got to saw it all over again. So I don't need to ask you who your main suspect is now.
Michelle. Come on. Like, it's not overly obvious, but it's obvious. Whereas things like with the stuff with Pedro, it's too obvious.
I don't think so. I don't think that Pedro's sabotages are so obvious. I think Michelle's are a lot more obvious.
My problem now, as we get closer and closer to the final, is these two slipping under the radar constantly, Alexei and Sarah. I don't know what to make of that.
I'm not going to make any promises of what I'm going to do if I'm wrong. I'm not going to do that because I'm setting myself up for failure. But I genuinely don't think it's Alexei. I don't think it's him. I don't
necessarily either, but I also think, wow, it would be really good gameplay if it was.
And here's the thing. In past, I've said that about several contestants. Like, I would be really surprised if it's this person and they would be in a massive, like, mega fantastic mole if it is them, and then it turns out to be them. So I've been horribly wrong before. That's probably the 1 out of the 5 left that I feel like is least suspicious. One that's growing on me is Sarah, because I feel like Sarah is also very much under the radar. Nobody seems to really talk about her. She's very often in the right place of these challenges. Mm-hmm. And I sort of felt, and this is something that I thought in the beginning of the series, where I was like, I'm always trying to think, like, who do I think out of these contestants is going to be in the final? And I always said, if Sarah makes it to the final, it's because she's the mole. Which sounds a bit rude, maybe, but I felt like, because I feel like Pedro, if he reaches to the final, it's still very 50-50, because I think he would be a very strong player.
Yeah.
Very tactical, very smart, but he would also be the perfect mole. With Sarah, I just feel like
she comes across very, very innocent and lovely, and I'm sure she is.
But she comes across, she comes across a bit naive at some point, which makes me think, like, if you make it to the final with that naivety, surely it's because you're the mole.
Maybe.
And you're just playing it. You're just acting.
So is Pedro still your main suspicion?
She is still my main suspicion. I'm going to go Pedro, Sarah, Nimrod, Michelle, Alexei.
Michelle's down that low.
for now. It might change. It might change on Sunday. I don't know. Michelle is also just like Hilda. She's going. I've had two people say to me, "Oh, Michelle is definitely not the mole." So it's so nobody knows.
Yeah,
nobody knows.
So obviously, my headline act is Michelle. I then have support from Sarah and Pedro, and then I do have Alexia and Nimrod. I just think Nimrod's a little bit Kelly as well, just a little bit clumsy, a little bit silly, a little bit gets maybe a little bit swept up in, the stress of it a little bit. So that maybe explains some of the wrong answers.
You know what it is with me, like with Nimrod, with this question that he had wrong, because he's obviously the reason in the end why they lost that, was it 4 or 5,000 years that they could have won with that challenge, with that skydiving challenge. But that was such an easy question, not an easy one to answer, but such an easy question as Mole to be like, oh, sorry, I didn't know that. Because who the fuck knows the weight of their brother? I don't know what my brother weighs. Not a clue. I would probably be 20
not to know what I choose not to know what I weigh.
Exactly. Same. So, but do you know how it's a perfect excuse? So in that sense, I don't feel like Nimrod's sabotages, if you can call them that, have been that obvious. I feel like what makes it so hard to read is that he's really done really well on some challenges and brought in quite a bit of money. And then on other challenges, he's done such subtle things that make it go wrong, where I feel like, I don't know. I find him very, very hard to read. Same with Pedro, because he had a similar question, wasn't it, about the weight of his mother-in-law or something? Or no, the age of his mother-in-law, which is another one that felt like, if you're 1 year off, that's not very suspicious, but it's enough to make the 5,000 euros go,
Yeah.
And then the way that he was like, because he'd already heard Sarah doubting, and he'd already heard Nimrod doubting, and, he might have already known. He might have already been signaled by that point if one of the others had something wrong. So he was like, oh, but I think I have one question wrong, so don't pick me, which makes him the good guy, because if it goes wrong, it's not his fault. But at the same time, he maybe already knows that it's going to go wrong anyway, so I don't really have to do anything here. And that, again, makes me think he is always in the right spot, and he's so clever.
Yeah.
I'm obsessed with Pedro, by the way, if you hadn't noticed.
I will also say, thank God he got that question wrong in a good way, because if it was the other way around, he would have had trouble when he got back to Belgium. Imagine saying you think your mother-in-law is way older than she really is. If it had done.
Oh, it wasn't that big of a difference, though. It was just 1 or 2 years. I think it was.
I know, but still, you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. Ladies of a certain age, it's quite sensitive about that stuff.
I mean, they still saw that he got it wrong.
They did.
They still showed it.
Gilles told us all. Overall, fantastic episode. So much in here. We've been talking for too long because there's just so much to cover, and I feel like we still only managed to really scratch the surface rather than go real into some of these challenges. There's just so much going on. It felt like there was no dull moments. So kudos again to the producers. Oh, you guys are